welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are making the coolest bag. But here's the thing, today is also the first tutorial, the first video for the OklaRoots Mystery Monthly Project Club, and this is in conjunction with Sallie Tomato. Oh my gosh, you guys. All right, I'm going to show you the bag, and then we're going to talk more about the monthly club. We're going to talk more about how all this is going to work, okay? So the project for month one is the Poppins tote. This tote is so cute. It's so much fun. It's a perfect summer bag, but it's a perfect all year bag because honestly for us, we would use it for putting like blankets and stuff in it, for going on a road trip, for overnight things, for snacks. This would be a great like car snack bag. This is also great again for summer. Going to the beach, you're going to the pool. It's a nice oversized bag. It's easy to carry. It's got two handle options, which is pretty neat. We have like these short little handles right here, but you can also boom, 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 pull it up, and now you have an adorable like shoulder strap. I just love this. So look, this is what I'm considering the front. We have a tassel, we have a little handmade tag, and then on the back we have a slip pocket. So this is where I would put my phone and stuff and like just basic needs. Inside we have a lining. This is a waterproof canvas lining as well as another slip pocket. So this pattern on its own, so much fun to make. Whatever material you have, you're gonna love making this bag. I do suggest some sort of a slight structure to your material. So for this bag here, we're actually using a faux leather for the big panels. We're using this really fun cork for the bottom, and then we're using waterproof canvas for the lining. The pattern originally does not have a lining included, so we are going to be adding that today. So in today's tutorial, we're going to tweak it just a little bit. We're going to add a lining. We're going to have the pocket in the lining as well as the pocket on the exterior. We're going to do the tassel addition. We're also going to pinch these corners to just make this bag look oh so professional. There's just like a couple like very specific things that make this bag go from looking handmade to like custom made. You know, like it looks so good that people aren't gonna believe you made it. Now, this bag right here is the exact bag I will be walking you through in the tutorial today. Yes, I already filmed it. I already filmed what you're gonna see next. This is the exact bag we're gonna be making today. This is also the exact bag you will have all the materials to make if you are a part of the monthly mystery project box with Sallie Tomato. Now this has been such a fun endeavor. Every time I've asked any of you guys, what would you like to see most from Shop OklaRoots? What would you like to see most from me? Project boxes, bag kits, that is always number one. You guys always want the material so you can just have the material, have the video, and put it all together. Bada bing, bada boom, all done. And to be honest, as much as I've wanted to do that, we're just not capable of doing it. I mean, my mom and I are just not capable of like cutting all the materials and meeting the demand. However, Sallie Tomato is. The project boxes, monthly kits, this is their jam. This is what they know better than anything. So when they reached out and asked if we could work together on this, I was all over it. It is such an exciting experience. So I'll have a link down below for the project box. If you're interested, it is an affiliate link, which means that part of the sales of these boxes does go directly back to the OklaRoots channel, which goes all into the tutorials. The way this monthly mystery project box works is every month you will be delivered a box. So every month you will be charged and then you will be delivered a box. And in that box you will have everything you need to make the item, including the pattern, as well as some notions and some other fun things for that month. And at the end of every month, the last Monday of every month, I will have a video going over the project, maybe an unboxing as well, we'll see. To be completely honest, this first month, we announced it on social media and it was overwhelmingly popular. We did not expect that, so I don't have a box in hand right now to unbox for you, but maybe in the future months I will. I will tell you though, in the box you have all of this. You have all of the material to make this, including the waterproof canvas, including stuff for the tassel, including the handmade tag, as well as another notion. And there will also be a link for the pattern as well as a cut list to help you cut out the material. You're gonna have just enough material to make this bag. However, if you are somebody who likes to customize your bags a little bit more, like you don't want to make it exactly like everybody else, I see you, I feel you. So I wanted to make sure you had enough material to switch it up. So let's say you're not really ready to do the waterproof canvas and the faux leather. You could actually follow the pattern as written so you don't have a lining, but just use the waterproof canvas as the exterior of the bag. So use your waterproof canvas cuts for the main exterior of the bag. Maybe use the faux leather for the base and also a pocket just to kind of try it out. Maybe use the faux leather for the handles. Switch it around a little bit, because the nice thing about a waterproof canvas is that the back side of it is just as good as the front side. The front side is a little bit softer, but the back side, easy to keep clean. So this could easily be a bag that only uses waterproof canvas and no lining. So I encourage you to play around with it. I mean, I want you, if you want to make the bag exactly like me, I am very excited about that. I only pick materials that I would like to use in my own personal bag, so that's why it looks like this. However, if you want to mix it up, add in some of your own material, I highly suggest you do that. If you do that and you want to share it, make sure you share it on social media. You can tag me, I'm at OklaRoots, tag Sallie Tomato. Also, if you're on Facebook, make sure you join the Sallie Tomato Facebook group and post pictures of what you're making over there as well, because I am so excited. I mean, I'm excited to see a bunch of these bags because honestly, I love it, but I'm also really excited to see what you guys do with the material and your own and kind of like mishmash it all together. So if you have more questions about the project box, please let me know down in the comments down below. If I have to do a separate little mini video kind of going over how it all works, I can do that. I know it can be a little confusing. If you're on social media, make sure you tag me. I've been talking about this project box over there quite a bit. Every month is going to be something different and it's always going to be a surprise. It's gonna be fun. I mean, I know what's coming up in the next couple months and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So if you join in, let me know. I wanna know if you're joining in, let me know. So thank you so much, first of all, to Sallie Tomato for allowing me to do this, for the pattern, for the materials, for allowing me to be part of this box. I'm so excited to be working with Sallie Tomato. You know, Sallie Tomato patterns are very popular on my channel. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. As always, timestamps will be listed along the bottom of the screen. You can also expand the description. There should be like a little arrow over here. Expand that description, and that's where you're gonna find timestamps listed, as well as links to everything, including the project box. And I will also link all of the material that I'm using separately. So if you just wanna buy the faux leather, you just wanna buy the cork, but you don't need the whole box, then you can go ahead and do that. All right, guys, let's get started. So per the pattern, you're going to need about 2/3 of a yard of your main fabric, and then about 1/2 of a yard of your contrast fabric. Now, I'm going to be using this faux leather today. This is also what's included in the monthly box if you're joining in on that. So I'll be using this faux leather for the main, and then this beautiful like palm leaf for my, I mean, this is so summery, it's so cute. This beautiful cutout cork. So the contrast is for the bottom of the bag, a pocket, and the straps. The main material is for the outside of the bag, and also we're going to use that for the tassel today. I am also going to be doing a lining, which is not in the pattern, but I think especially if we're going to use this for a summer bag, so pool, beach, things like that, we're definitely going to want some lining. And again, if you are part of the monthly subscription box, the lining is included today as well. If you were purchasing the lining, I would say probably get around a yard of waterproof canvas. That way you have plenty of extra waterproof canvas to use in other projects. But if you're doing the subscription box, you already have a nice cut of waterproof canvas that will give you just enough to make this bag today. I also have some Sallie Tomato washi tape. This is great for holding down straps, holding down pockets before we take them to the sewing machine. And then also we have this beautiful little handmade bag tag that we're gonna put on the outside of the bag. So let's just quickly jump through the pattern pieces. I know we already kind of went over this, but we have one cut of our contrast material. This is gonna be for an exterior pocket. To go with it, we also have a cut of our lining material, which is a really nice waterproof canvas. This comes from Wonderground Fabrics, and we're going to use those together to make the exterior pocket. Then we have 3 cuts of our cork, and this is going to be for the bag straps. Finally, the base of the bag is going to be this beautiful cork. Whatever material you choose, just remember, like, you know, you got to be able to clean it. I know that this cork specifically has some lighter colors on it. However, I think over time it's going to look really nice as it kind of gets worn in a little bit. Next, we have our tassel material, and today we're going to be making a no hardware required tassel, so you can do this with any material you have. I have made so many tassels. These are so fun. You don't need to buy hardware. You just need to have some scraps. So make sure you check the pattern for the cuts for this, but these are really fun to make. And then I have 2 cuts. These are pretty big cuts, so 2 cuts of our faux leather, and this is going to be for the front and back of the bag. Next, this is completely optional, but this is for the lining. I am going to have a lining slip pocket, so I have 2 cuts of lining material for that. These are the same size as the exterior pocket cut. And then I have a piece of my lining material for the base of the bag. This is the same size as the base cut using the contrast material. And then I have 2 larger cuts of my lining material for the main body of the bag. Now this is just slightly different. I'm actually cutting these down a 1/2 of an inch shorter. So let's look at it this way. So it's a 1/2 of an inch shorter than the exterior materials, just a little bit, because the way we construct this bag later, we're gonna fold this down, and you don't want your lining to be too bunchy anyways. So that's the only difference. It's just 1/2 of an inch shorter than the other piece. For all the extra stuff today, as always, a healthy supply of clover clips. The thread I'm using is a Tex 35 weight thread. This is great for domestic machines, and I'm choosing a color that kind of goes with my bag. I think this is a really pretty color. The bobbin thread is just going to be this Gutermann thread. I get this from Joann's. The needle I'm using today is a Microtex 8012 needle. I have my handy dandy stiletto as always, some fabric cutting scissors, and some snips, a little 1" by 6" ruler. For marking, try using marking tools that are not going to show up. So, chalk marker, air erasing marker. If you're using vinyl or faux leather, I highly suggest you get one of these silver pens. This is from Mormino. These tools will either erase on their own over time or they will wipe off easily. That's what we want today. We have a lot of exterior stuff we're working with today. And then for the tassel, I have a couple different glue options. My Beacon 3-in-1 glue or E6000. I did just use E6000 the other day on a tassel and it worked great. So some sort of sturdy glue. Beacon 3-in-1 also works really well, but this actually works really well with tassel hardware. I would suggest the E6000. So let's first start with our pockets. Again, I'm deviating from the pattern a little bit. The pattern has a very simple way to do these pockets by just folding over the edge and top stitching this on, but we're gonna zhuzh it up just a little bit, add a few more steps. So for my lining pocket, I'm gonna take both cuts of my waterproof canvas, and if you haven't worked with waterproof canvas before, waterproof canvas has kind of like a soft side, it's like a fabric-y side, and then it has a side that feels kind of like plastic. Depending on the color, it can be hard to tell the difference. Just give it a flip-a-roo back and forth. The plasticky side doesn't feel as nice as the right side, so the plasticky side is the back. So we're gonna put our waterproof canvas pocket cuts right sides together, just line up all the edges. And then I like to use clips to just clip around. And once I have this all clipped, on the bottom edge of my pocket, I marked a 4" space. So this is where I'm not going to stitch, okay? So now I'm gonna do the same thing with my contrast material and my lining, just laying them right sides together and clipping around all 4 edges. And then once again, after this was clipped, I have a 4" opening down here. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna start at one of these marks and we're gonna sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around these pockets until we get to the other mark. Make sure you backstitch really well at these beginning and ending marks because we will be turning the pocket out through that hole and we don't want those stitches to rip. Do this for both pockets. All right, now that they're sewn together, what we want to do is we want to cut the corners. So these corners down here, we're just going to cut them at a 45-degree angle. You're cutting about 1/8 of an inch or so away from the stitching, from that corner of stitching. You don't want to get too close to it because you could rip it, but you want to get somewhat close to it. And then I also like to just cut a couple like itty-bitty little slits that are parallel to those 45-degree angles. I know, we're having a math lesson, aren't we? But just a little bit, not close to the thread at all, just like halfway into the seam. I find that that helps those corners spread out a little bit. All right, and let's repeat that for the lining pocket. As usual, I forgot to show my favorite turning tool, but this is my favorite turning tool when turning out any of these pockets. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna push the material through the hole we left on the bottom and turn the pockets right side out. And once I have it mostly pushed out, I like to take my metal turning tool and with the more blunt end, I put that in and start pushing it along the seams. And then I'll take the more pointy end and I'll very carefully get in there and push the corners out. There we go. And this is my favorite turning tool because it very rarely punctures the material and rips a hole. Okay, so now, depending on the material you're using, if you're using like a quilt cotton or even a, waterproof canvas or anything like that, you can iron this pocket to get it nice and flat. I find, especially for a lining pocket, I can finger press it, but what I do is I put my finger inside, I kind of roll out the seams, flatten them out, and then I just add clips to them, And just that pressure from the clips for a few seconds really helps to flatten this out. But if you want to iron this with the waterproof canvas, you're in good hands because the back of the waterproof canvas is that kind of plasticky. Whenever you put heat on this, it'll like stick to itself and it'll be nice and crisp. But my iron is not heated up and it takes a while to heat up. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to clip these, make them look nice. And the seam we're most concerned with right now is the top seam here, where it's the longer edge that does not have a hole in it. That's where we're most focused right now. And then if you want, you can add clips to the bottom edge as well. What I like to do is just put my finger in the hole right at the seams here and just kind of tug it, and then I find that the material folds in on itself and I can get a pretty straight line. So I just kind of mess with it and then I clip it. Even if you press this with an iron, I suggest you also add clips at least to the bottom edge, just to make sure it doesn't move around on you. All right, so now I'm going to repeat that with the exterior pocket. So this has that beautiful cork. So once I have it all poked out, I'm going to just flatten it out. However, look at this. It's like a little, it's all poofed up like a little pillow. This cork would look beautiful on a pillow. I don't know how comfortable it'd be, but it would look amazing. Look how beautiful this cork is. I hope you guys love it too. If you ordered the box, I hope you guys love this cork as much as I do. I was very excited about it. So you can see once again, I'm flattening this out and using clips to do it. If you're a more skilled sewer, you probably don't even need to use the clips. You can go just straight to the machine and stitch it down nice and neat. All right, once again, I'm just gonna pull on the opening. I'm gonna do my best to get this as straight as possible. This is an exterior pocket, so it will be more noticeable. So do take a little bit more time on this bottom opening down here, just to make sure it's nice and straight and that the lining isn't peeking out from the bottom. Okay, so now that our pockets are prepped, we're going to focus on the top edge of the pocket. So remember, the top edge is a long edge that does not have the opening. So looking at the top edge of the pockets, we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along both these top edges. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so our pockets are ready to apply. Let's do one at a time. Let's start with the exterior pocket. So grab one of your exterior main panel pieces, and on the bottom edge, you can mark that midpoint mark. If you're going to mark the midpoint marks using scissors, like I like to do, I cut little snips, don't do that on the top edge. The top edge is going to be left raw in the version I'm doing today. I will give you tips if you want to not leave it raw, but I'm going to be leaving the top edge raw, so if you snip a little triangle up here, you will see it in the end. So I'm only going to snip the midpoint mark on the bottom edge because that will be in a seam in the end. So I'm just folding it in half, and then I take my scissors and I make the teeniest, tiniest little tiny cut. You don't even think you did anything, but when you open it up, you have a great little midpoint mark. So if you want, you can find the midpoint mark on the bottom edge of your pocket as well. For that, I'm going to use an air erasing marker, so I'm just folding it like this. Grab my marker, and I'm marking on the exterior with an air erasing marker, so it will not stay there in the end. And then we're going to measure up 1.5 inches from the midpoint mark on the bottom here, and we're going to line up the bottom edge of our pocket with that spot. All right, and this is where you're going to really be able to tell if your pocket is not perfectly straight on the bottom, which is fine. So now this is what we're going to try. I was excited to try this washi tape. We're going to grab some washi tape, and we're going to use our washi tape to hold down the pocket because I have to transfer this whole piece of material from my table over to my sewing machine, and I don't want to lose this spot. So I'm going to use washi tape here to hold it down, and then I'll remove the tape as I come up on it when I'm sewing. Nice thing about washi tape is you can also sew over it and then just rip it out of the seams. But just to be a little bit easier, I remove the tape before I sew over it. I'm just gonna put it all, there we go. So now we're gonna start at the top right corner and we're gonna top stitch down to the bottom corner and then top stitch along the bottom. And as we top stitch along the bottom, we are closing that hole. So be careful here. Grab your stiletto if you need to and kind of manipulate the material so that the hole is closed and it looks as neat as you can get it to look. And then we're gonna go back up the other side. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end up here. If you want, you can also sew like a little triangle. If you have rivets, after you're done stitching this on, maybe add a couple small rivets on the top corners here. That would look so nice and it would provide a lot of stability to this pocket. I'm not using rivets today, but you know I'm going to suggest them a lot. All right, let's go attach this pocket. Okay, now I'm actually gonna take my washi tape and just stick it to the edge of my table, and I'll use the same pieces for the lining. Is the bottom edge of this pocket straight? No. Did I expect it to be? Not really. If you've been here for a moment, you know my stuff is always a little wonky. So it's a little bit bowed up, but I'm perfectly fine with that. My pocket is nice and secure. That looks nice. Now, one thing I'm going to do to just secure the tops just a little bit is you can see I left the thread long. So the top thread and the bobbin threads are nice and long. I didn't cut them short. I'm going to flip this over to the back, and I'm just going to pull on my bobbin thread until I see a little loop from the top thread. And then I'll use my stiletto to pull that loop to the back, just like that. Do the same thing on the other side. If you have a situation like I do where you're pulling and pulling and pulling and that top thread is not coming back, that's because it's nice and knotted inside the material already, so you don't even have to worry about that. You don't have to tie that one. So I'm just gonna grab my scissors and snip nice and close on the thread, and then cut the back thread as well. For the other side though, where it was pretty easy to pull the top thread back, I'm just gonna do 3 knots using the top and bobbin threads. That just secures it. I mean, that's the number one thing with these pockets, is we just wanna make sure that while we're using them and we're sticking our phone in there and putting toys and snacks in there over time, it doesn't start to rip. So there you go. What a cute little pocket. And like I said, if you wanna add some rivets here, you know that I'm gonna support that idea. So let's put this to the side and let's work on the lining pocket. So we're going to do the exact same thing on the lining pocket. I'm going to mark the midpoint of the bottom edge by just folding this in half and kind of pulling on it. And again, I like to use the scissors, but if you prefer to use a marking tool like a pen or an erasing marker, chalk, please use that. Don't use the scissors if you're not comfortable doing that. And once again, I'm going to center my pocket 1.5 inches up from the bottom. And then I'm just going to grab my washi tape that I already used. Should be good for another round. And I'm just going to add my tape to my pocket to hold it in place. There we go. All right, and now I'm just going to top stitch around the 3 edges, the side, the bottom, and the other edge. During top stitching, I'm closing up the hole in the bottom, and I'm going to back stitch really well at the beginning and the end. So now that we have this pocket stitched on, we're not going to discuss if it's level or if it's a little crooked. We're just gonna flip it over and we're going to pull the bobbin threads, and if we can, pull the top thread to the back, and then we're just going to triple knot this. So now we have both of our pockets attached. They're both a little wonky, which is true to form for me. That's how it usually goes for me. I gotta be honest, a lot of times things like this is glaringly obvious right here because we have this straight edge of our material and this curvy edge on the bottom of our pocket. Will it be that obvious once this is sewn in and the bag is in use? I really don't think so. Little things like this that are like, oh my gosh, that looks so bad when you're making it, they don't usually turn out that noticeable in the end. So I'm going to go ahead, not fix this, and we'll see. I'll be the guinea pig for you guys. We'll see how it looks in the end. Same thing with this pocket. It's a little bit crooked, but you guys, it's a lining pocket. We give ourselves some grace for that. If you want, you can also stitch down like a center line or maybe like a little spot over here so you have like a little pin pocket. That's always fun. You know, you could go, let's see, how long would you go for that? Maybe like 2 inches over. You could do like 2 inches over and just top stitch a line. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and end, and you can have a nice little pin pocket there. Lots of fun stuff you can do with this. All right, I'm putting both of these panels to the side. Okay, now we're gonna add our bag tag, and I'll be honest, this is the first time I've used one of these metal bag tags on a bag like this, so we're gonna learn together. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the midpoint mark of the top edge, and remember, I'm not going to cut that. So I'm going to look for the midpoint mark on the top edge, and I'm going to use my favorite silver marking pen because this will wipe right off of vinyl or faux leather. There we go. And I just use that to mark the top edge. And the nice thing about the silver pen too is that it's not so noticeable when you mark it, but it's reflective. So it catches it in the light, which means it's very easy to see when you're working with it. Everybody should have one of these in their sewing room. All right, so let's open up our little package here. So we have a washer for the back, and then we have the tag for the front. And what you do is you insert your tag through the front of the bag, and we put the washer on the back, and the prongs go through it and spread out. I'll show you. So placement for this bag is a little tricky because the way that the straps are in the end, when you pull them a certain way, the bag kind of folds on itself at the top. And for me, personally, I don't want to lose my handmade sign whenever it folds. My goal is that it will be under the fold. You'll see in just a moment when we're done. So I'm actually going to measure 2 1/4 inches down from the midpoint mark. There we go. And I'm going to mark a dot right here on the center of the bottom of my ruler. So that way I know this is 2 1/4 inches down and centered. A couple things to keep in mind with this is that 1/2 inch of this top edge will be folded down in the end, and then again the straps will pull it up a little bit. If it gets lost in the curve, it's fine. But my goal is for it to be below the curve. We'll see. So now what I like to do is take my bag tag and test it out with my washer because I have to know which prongs this goes into so I can center it. So it looks like my prongs are going to go into the slits that are 1 in from each side. So they're not going to go into the very end holes. They're going to go in to the second from the end holes. So that's how I know where they're going in, and then I can figure out the center of this washer. So there are 8 little slits on here, so that means that the center of the washer is just right between 4 in from each side. And once I have this nice and straight, I'm going to mark on my material the holes that are 2 in from the sides, right? So not the first hole, the next one on each side, because that's where my prongs are going to go. And now I know it's centered. And then I'm going to grab a seam ripper, and I'm just going to rip very gently right where I marked, no farther. I mean, you maybe don't even mark the entire length of it. It's better for the hole that you rip here to be too small rather than too big. So I'm going to take my handmade tag, and I'm going to just slide that in there like that. This is so sweet. It's nice, like it's not too big, you know? It's like a perfect dainty size where it's like you want to let everybody know you made it, but you know you're humble. So actually, before we install the washer, I am going to suggest we add something else to protect the vinyl. So I'll be honest, I normally would use some sort of interfacing like a Decofil light, a Decofil heavy, even a fusible fleece. But since that's not something that's included in the pattern, I'm going to use what we have. So I have some scrap here of the vinyl. You just need tiny, tiny bits of scraps, just enough to cover the back of this. And I'm going to take that washer and I'm going to mark the same spots on the scrap material. And then I'm going to seam rip the scrap material as well. And now I'm going to take this scrap material and I'm going to install it over the prongs before I add the washer. There we go. And that just beefs it up a little bit so that if at some point this gets snagged, this gets pushed on, anything like that, we don't want it to rip our material, right? The material, we need to keep it in as good a shape as possible. So now I'm going to put the washer over the prongs and I'm going to fold these out just like that. And now the next step is we do want to protect the back of this because we don't want these prongs to rub against our lining material and cause a hole. So again, normally I would use fusible fleece. Fusible fleece is great for that. So if you have any interfacing that you want to cover this with, just glue it on, that's fine. We can also use the vinyl. So I'm going to cut the vinyl. I haven't used vinyl to do this before, but there's a first for everything. Let's try it. I'm going to use my Beacon 3-in-1 glue for this. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to use the vinyl. I'm going to use some waterproof canvas. Okay, so as you can see, I have a piece of waterproof canvas here. It's just a scrap piece, and this is just a little bit more lightweight than the vinyl, which I think is going to work better. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue on the back of this. And then once I have the glue on there, I'm just going to put this down and cover up those prongs and glue this to the back of my material. There we go. All right, that's good. Let's set that to the side and let it dry. It's a little crooked. Go ahead and straighten it out. There we go. I'm going to let this dry and let's construct the lining. So on the bottom edge of each of your main lining panels, mark the midpoint. And then on the long edges of your base panel, mark the midpoint. So now grab one of your lining panels. I'll grab the one with the pocket and lay it right side up. And then take your base panel and lay it right side down, matching up those midpoint marks. And just clip them together on the bottom edge here. And now take a ruler and mark a 1/4 inch in from the side of the base panel. When we're sewing this, we don't want to sew all the way to the end of this base panel. We want to make sure we stop a 1/4 inch away from the edges. So now we're going to stitch down the base panel to the main lining panel, and we're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you start and stop at your marks and back stitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn, you're going to grab your scissors and you're going to cut from the bottom edge up to the stitches until you get to the stitching. Don't cut the actual stitches, don't cut past it. You're just cutting from the bottom edge to the stitches. This is going to help us box these bottoms in just a moment. So do this for both edges. And you're cutting between the main lining and also the base material here. So now we're going to take the base and we're going to fold it down and away, and we're going to make sure that seam is underneath the base panel. So I'm just going to press this with my fingers. You can press it with an iron if you'd like. So now I'm going to top stitch this. Top stitching the lining isn't so important, but it does give it nice structure. It's going to be more important on the exterior. But I'm going to top stitch along this bottom edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and we are not top stitching the 1/4 inch over here. So if you need to, go grab yourself a marking tool. And what you can do is you can just kind of pull up this edge because it's not stitched down, and then you can just mark right where it folds up. So 1/4 inch in from each side. Again, air erasing marking tool. Okay, so I have my marks. My marks are about a 1/4 inch in from each side, and I'm just going to top stitch along this bottom, making sure that the seam is beneath the bottom panel. There we go. The base is attached to one panel. We're going to repeat that with the other lining panel. So take the remaining lining unit and lay it right side up. Take your bottom unit and lay it right side down. We're working on the opposite edge now of that bottom unit. And just center it using your midpoint marks and line it up on the bottom edge. And I like to use clips to hold it together. And then I'm going to grab a ruler and mark in a 1/4 inch from the sides of the base panel. And now let's sew along this bottom edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure you start and stop at your marked spots and backstitch at both places. Once that's sewn on, at your mark for the 1/4 inch in from the sides, just cut from the bottom edge up to the stitching without cutting the actual threads you stitched on there. There you go. And now take the whole unit and pull it so that the base panel goes down and the seam goes beneath the base panel. I know, this is where a big table comes in handy. It's a big bag. It's a great one. All right, once again, I'm going to mark in a 1/4 inch from the edge, and I do that by just lifting this up and marking at the crease there. All right, and I'm just finger pressing this. If you want to iron it, it will probably make it easier if you do. The lining, I can get away with a bit of sloppiness though. I mean, you know, not too much, but a little bit. And now I'm going to top stitch along this bottom edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, making sure I start and stop between my marks at a 1/4 inch on each side. Okay, so the base is attached to the lining. We're going to go ahead and finish up the lining separately from the exterior, and then we're going to add it all together. So we're going to pretty much repeat this exact same process with the exterior, but I will walk you through that as well. So as you can see, I'm folding my lining right sides together, and I'm matching up the sides here. And I'm going to clip along these sides. So I'm just doing these bigger sides over here. So now for the lining specifically, we're going to start stitching at the top at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But as we go down, we can increase that seam allowance to a 3/8 inch seam allowance, or even a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I would suggest stick with the 3/8 inch, but linings can be baggy if they're constructed the same size as the exterior. So if we increase the seam allowance as we go down, not at the top, but as we go down, it kind of tucks it in a little bit more and gives it a nicer fit. So I'm going to go from a 1/4 inch at the start. As I go down, I'm going to increase my seam allowance to a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way to the bottom here, backstitch at the beginning and the end on both sides. Okay, last thing we have to do for the lining is create the box corners. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab the corners here like this, and you're going to pull them apart, and you're going to just create a straight line. If you'd like, first, you can go back to your original bit here, fold down right here, and then mark the midpoint on this bottom edge. Very, very tiny little cut there. And then pull them apart and match up the seam from the side with the midpoint on the bottom edge. And you can press the seam open or just push it to one side or the other. For the lining, again, it's not that big of a deal which one you choose. We'll talk more about that when we get to the exterior. And we're going to try to pull out our edge. So remember, we cut a slit on the bottom here. That should allow us to pull this out and get a nice straight corner here. Do this for both sides. All right, I'm gonna grab the other box corner and do the same thing. All right, now I'm gonna sew along both of these edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. There we go, looking good. So now you can see this is what the inside of the bag is gonna look like. It's nice and big. So let's repeat this now for the exterior. So grab one of your main exterior pieces and make sure you find the midpoint on the bottom edge of it. And then grab your contrasting base. Oh, don't those look so good together? And find the midpoint on, go ahead and find the midpoint on all 4 edges. It'll help you later if you do the short edges as well. All right, so take your main exterior panel, lay it right side up. Take your contrasting panel and lay it right side down. And then line up the bottom edge with the long edge of the contrasting panel and clip together. And then just like we did with the lining, we're gonna mark in 1/4 inch from the short edges on the back of the base panel. So now let's sew along this bottom panel at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, starting and stopping at those marks, so don't go all the way to the edge, and backstitch where you start and stop. So once that's sewn on, grab your scissors and cut from the bottom edge straight up, right where you marked that 1/4 inch. So you're gonna cut up right to the stitching, but you're not gonna cut the thread. You're just gonna cut right next to it. There we go. So now take the bottom panel and fold it down and make sure the seam stays behind the bottom panel. Depending on your material, this can be a little tricky because it starts to get a little bulky. So this is something I kind of like to work on at the machine. I'm trying to pre-fold it a little bit so that way it has like muscle memory. And then I'm going to mark, once again, 1/4 inch in from the short edges. So to do that this time, I'm just gonna pull up on the side here, and right where it folds, that's where I'm gonna mark, because that's where my stitches are. And I am using a fabric air erasing marker. And now let's top stitch along this bottom edge only between those 2 marks. And I do back stitch my top stitching here. Now grab your remaining exterior panel and make sure you have the bottom midpoint marked. Lay that right side up, and then grab your unit with the bottom panel and lay it right side down. Match up those midpoint marks. And then once again, mark 1/4 inch in from the sides of the base panel. And now let's sew along this bottom edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure you start and stop at those marks and backstitch at the beginning and the end. So now that that's attached, pull the larger unit that has the bottom panel down. And once again, we want that seam that we just sewed to go behind the bottom panel. So do your best to just kind of tuck it down. And just like before, I like to just press it a little bit with my fingers. Here we go. And I forgot to mention this before, but if you want to go around this pocket up here at 1/4 inch top stitch as well as 1/8 inch to really secure it, that would be a great idea. I've been okay with 1/8 inch, but if you want extra security, go a second round on the sides and the bottom at 1/4 inch. And now I'm just going to mark on the bottom here where I need to start and stop. So I'm just going to kind of pull up on the side and mark with an air erasing marker on both sides. And now I'm going to top stitch along this seam at an 1/8 inch seam allowance, starting and stopping at my marks. Tell you what, I am so excited to see this bag come together. I think it's going to be beautiful. So now let's take our exterior and fold it in half, right sides together, and line up the sides of the exterior. Now I'm just clipping along these short edges. So now we're going to sew along both these clipped edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, now the pattern suggests top stitching along both of those seams you just sewed. So pressing the seam allowance open and then top stitching on each side of the seam, which will, you know, be helpful to keep the seam open. I'm going to try it, but I will be honest, the first time I tried this bag, I did not do that. I did not top stitch the side seams at all, purely because I didn't read it in the pattern, and it turned out beautifully. I had no problems constructing it. So if you're like, ugh, I really don't know if I want to wrestle this to top stitch the side seams, I would suggest skipping that. I think that that's more of a want than a need for this bag, but I do want to give it a try since it's suggested. So what we're going to do is we're going to finger press this seam open, and we're going to top stitch on both sides of the seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just trying to catch the back material to get this super flat. We're going to do this for both sides. I'm going to keep the bag flipped wrong side out, and I'm just going to kind of work from the inside like this. It can be a little challenging depending on the material you're using. You might want to use a walking foot for this. Or like I said, if you're like, I don't know, just skip this top stitching step. But I am going to give it a try. So let's go to the machine and see how it works. So that was not nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. And to be honest, it gives the bag such a professional look. I don't know if you can see, but wowza. That definitely kicks up the, okay, that, if you're using really stiff material, it's going to be very challenging. I would suggest skipping it. However, if you're using the material from the box, I suggest giving it a shot because wowza. That's a detail that a bag maker would notice and go, are you sure you made that? Because that doesn't look like you made that. So nice. Okay, let's flip it wrong side out again so we can box up these corners. So just like we did before, we're going to pull on the corners and we're going to flatten out this edge. If you marked the midpoint on the short edge of the bottom, line that up with the seam on the side and then just go all the way across this bottom here, lining up the edges. And do this for both of your box corners. Alright, so now we're going to sew along both of these short edges at 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure we back stitch at the beginning and the end. Then we're going to do a second row of stitching just at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We really want to secure these box bottoms as best we can. Okay, let's fold this right side out and take a look. So now we have our exterior and our lining done. We just need to attach them. Now the way I'm going to attach them is similar to how the pattern constructs the bag. So the pattern does not call for lining. The pattern has it so that the inside of the bag is just the back of your material. But you know me, I love a lining. However, the pattern is going to have you fold down this top edge by 1/2 inch and then top stitch it to, you know, get rid of this top raw edge. We're going to do that with the lining. You could birth the bag. So that's where you take your lining and your exterior and you put them together, right sides together, and you sew completely around the top edge. You will have had to leave a hole somewhere in the bottom of your lining and then turn it out and top stitch the top. That's a very popular way to do that, and you can definitely do that with this bag if you'd like. However, depending on the material, top stitching around the top edge can get a little difficult, and I wanted to kind of still stick with the pattern as much as possible. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to keep our bag right side out, keep our lining wrong side out, and then I'm going to just insert my lining into the exterior. Now I'm going to take it out in just a moment, but I want to show you what this is going to look like before we move on. So I'm just pushing down those corners, and you have a bag like this. See, when you open it up, it'll be like that. And we're going to fold down the exterior over the raw edge of the lining and top stitch it in place. So to help with that, let's mark some things. So what I'm gonna do with a chalk pencil or with an air erasing marker, I'm actually going to mark a 1/2 inch along the top edge on the right side of my material, so it's the inside of the bag, on my lining. And it doesn't have to be perfect all the way around. You just have to have a general idea of where the material needs to go in this next step. All right, so I have a 1/2 inch marked on the lining all the way around. And now I'm gonna take my lining and insert it into my bag. And I'm gonna try to tuck in those corners and get it nice and fitted in there. And you may be wondering why I haven't attached the straps yet. I actually do like to attach the straps through the exterior and the lining. I think that helps make them a little bit sturdier. So I do not attach the straps to the exterior and then do the lining. I do all of this first. Straps are sewn between exterior and lining. So I'm gonna start over here at a seam, and I'm gonna match up the seam with my lining and the seam with my exterior, and I'm gonna fold my exterior down over the top edge of my lining, keeping it all lined up, and then I'm just gonna use clips to hold that in place. And I'm just gonna go around wrapping my exterior over my lining until it meets that mark. And I'm trying to get a 1/2 inch overhang here. So I'm gonna go do the other side seam too before I go around the entire unit. And the challenge here is getting this all clipped in place before the marker erases. I'll be honest, this is kind of a workout. So if you need to take a break, take a break. Because I know my arms are hurting right now. Big bags are not always hard, but they can be pretty tiring. Okay, so now that I have it mostly clipped, what I'm gonna do is just kind of give it a look, see, make sure it's even. If you've got some bits that are more of a 1/2 inch, some bits that are more 5/8 inch, that's okay. I really don't think you need to be that picky. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna just top stitch at a 1/4 inch from this top edge here. So I am going to be doing it with the right side up like this. The bag is nice and big. I should be able to maneuver it. If it's way too challenging, you can flip the bag carefully, just enough so that it's lining side out, just so you can kind of flip up this edge. Just try not to let anything slip out when you do this. You don't want the lining to move out of place and not get caught. And you can just top stitch it like this, but we are going to top stitch along the top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so now that that's stitched on, the thing I want to do right now is go around and just make sure my lining was caught everywhere. We do still have a good amount of overhang here, probably because I folded it over just a little bit more than a 1/2 inch. That's okay. So, as you can see, I have a pretty decent lip here. I'm okay with that. If you wanted to like tuck it down even more, you could go at a 3/8 inch, maybe even close to a 1/2 inch around again and just really stitch down the top edge. But I've found that it's fine with a little bit of an overhang like that. Since we're using a faux leather, it's not gonna fray or anything, so that looks good. Actually, you know what? I think I am gonna go around again. I'm gonna go around again at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just to try to catch that bottom edge. I just want to try it. I just want to try it, so let me try it so you don't have to, okay? If it's a fail, then you don't have to do it. If it's a success, then give it a shot. But I did fold this down a little bit farther than a 1/2 inch, so I can probably do a 1/2 inch all the way around again, just a second row of top stitching. All right, let's flip this out and see how it looks. Oh yeah, that is looking great. And I don't think you can tell how wonky that pocket is then, personally. I don't think you can. And the double top stitching looks nice up here. It caught the bottom edge all the way around, gives it nice and security. So it's always an option. If you don't like the way something looks, you can always adjust and make it the way you want it. All right, now we gotta do the strap. So first thing we wanna do is find the midpoint on the top edge of these. So use something. You can use a piece of tape. I'm gonna use my silver marking tool here and just mark like that. Don't use a Sharpie, please. Don't use a ballpoint pen. Don't use anything you can't wipe off. So there we go. This is gonna help us place the straps. So go ahead and set this bag to the side. So now we have 3 cuts of material for our straps, and what we're gonna pretty much do is attach all 3 of them together and then cut it in half to get 2 straps. So take 2 of your straps and you're going to lay them right sides together and perpendicular right at the corner, just like this. And what you want to do is mark a diagonal line from the top left corner on the wrong side of the strap down to where the bottom right corner is of the bottom strap. There we go. Now we're just going to clip these together. And now let's just sew right along that line and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn, grab your scissors and you're gonna cut towards the edge of the triangle here, so this little overhang here, and cut about 1/4 inch away from the stitching. I just eyeball it. And now we're gonna spread that seam open with your fingers, okay? Give it a good push, flip it over, and now top stitch on both edges of that seam at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have 2 straps connected like that, we're going to connect the 3rd strap the same way. So lay your remaining strap right side down and perpendicular to your strap unit you've already sewn. And then mark yourself a diagonal line going from top left corner to bottom right corner. And now let's just sew along that marked line. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. And then trim down this corner, cutting 1/4 inch away from the stitching. And then just finger press open that seam. There we go. And now let's top stitch along both edges of the seam. So once you have it all stitched together, take your long strap and bring the short edges together. You're just going to fold the whole thing in half. And then here's the half fold right here. And then at that half fold, you're just going to cut it. So now you have 2 straps. So now with our 2 straps, we're going to make loops. So take one end of your strap, lay it right side up, and then take the other end and loop it around and lay it right side down and perpendicular. So it should be like this. Make sure it's not too twisted. And we're going to combine these the same way we've been combining the long pieces before, by just marking a diagonal line from the top left corner to the bottom right corner, and then just clip those together. And do the same thing with the other strap. All right, now let's sew along these marked lines and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now let's trim down those corners again by cutting 1/4 inch away from the seam and away from the straps. And then finger press that seam open just like that and top stitch on both sides of the seam, and do this for both of your straps. All right, now we have to fold the handle in half. And the way the pattern has it is you just fold it in half like this, raw edges together, and then top stitch along the edges. This does mean that you will have some raw edges on one side, and the material that I picked for this does have like a canvas on it, so it can, you can see, it can fray. So I don't think it'll hurt the durability of the handles over time, but it will kind of give it more of like a worn in, kind of a weathered look. If you're not into that, and you don't want it to do that, what you can do is fold both edges back to meet in the center and create your strap like that. Now one side will have the edges on the back, and then other side will look like this. So you kind of have to decide which way you want to go with this. Personally, I kind of like the frayed edges, so I'm just going to fold the whole thing in half per the pattern. But if you decide to fold it the other way, let me know how that goes, because I bet that will look awesome. You could also, if you really wanted to make sure you didn't have any raw edges anyways, you could just double the width of these straps. So whatever this is, what is this? This is about 2 inches wide. So make it 4 inches wide. and then you would fold them in on each other like this, and then fold the whole strap in again, and you would have a 1-inch wide strap. You see what I'm saying? But that does get a little bulky, so it depends on how comfortable you are sewing that kind of bulk. But it would look great. You have another option here too. You don't even have to use straps like this with the cork. You could just use webbing. Lots of options with bag making. However, I do like this raw edge on the side. If you're using a faux leather or vinyl, you could also edge coat this side. If you didn't like the raw edges showing, you could fold this in half like this, top stitch it, and then put edge coating on the raw edges. You have a lot of options here. So as you can see, I'm just folding the strap in half, wrong sides together, and clipping along the raw edges. You can clip along the folded edge as well if you'd like, but I find just clipping along the raw edge works well enough. All right, now let's top stitch along the raw edge and then also along the folded edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to top stitch the raw edge first, and then I'll flip it over, and then I'll top stitch the folded edge. That way I can make sure it's nice and flat. Do this for both of your straps. So now we have our straps and we have our bag and we just need to attach it. So let's mark some spots on our straps to get started, okay? So I'm going to find where the two seams are. Okay, they're kind of close together, and I'm going to keep them down here on the bottom, and I'm going to just fold my strap in half. And the top here, that's furthest away from those seams, that's going to be my top center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an air erasing marker and I'm going to mark right there. That's my top center. And now using that center mark, I'm going to also mark 4.5 inches away on the strap. So I'm going to go over 4.5 inches and mark to the left. And I'm also going to mark 4.5 inches to the right of the middle mark. Okay, so do this for both your straps. I'm doing it on the folded side. You could do it on the raw side. I don't know if it matters. So same thing on this one. I'm going to pull the seams so that they're lined up and away from the top edge here. Don't think too much about this. It's okay however you decide to do it. Okay, so the straps are marked. Now I'm going to grab my bag and my vinyl pen. Remember, I have the midpoint marks on the top edge of my bag. I'm also going to mark 2 inches on either side of it. All these marks are just to make it easier for us to place the strap, make it look, you know, not too wild. So I'm going to mark 2 inches to the left and 2 inches to the right of my middle mark. And this is on the exterior. I'm going to do this on both sides. Okay, so let's see if I can lay this down to help show this a little bit better. So I'm working on this side right here with my handmade tag. I'm going to grab one of my straps. I'm going to find the edge that has the midpoint mark. All right, so here's my middle mark. Over here on the left, I have a 4.5 inch mark, and on the other side, I have the 4.5 inch mark. My 4.5 inch mark on the left side is going to line up just outside, so just to the left of that 2 inch mark that's away from the center. And I'm just going to clip that in place. I'm also going to grab some of my washi tape. So I'm trying to get this as straight as possible. I'm going to grab some of my washi tape here to really hold this in place as well. There we go. I'm going to do one at a time to make it easier. So I'm just going to work on this left side first. You might want to get a ruler and just mark where you want to sew here. So I'm just going to remove these clips and I'm going to line up my ruler with that first row of top stitching. That's where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to mark right there. I'm going to sew right over the top stitching. You know what? My washi tape's in the way. I'm gonna move it down a little bit. And then I'm gonna also sew an inch below that. And you know what, just to make it a little bit easier, I think I'm also gonna mark my diagonal marks. So I'm marking from where the top stitching on my strap and that first top mark are, that corner, down to the top stitching on my strap and the bottom mark. Because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew a rectangle and then I'm also gonna sew a triangle through it. And by just marking all this before, it's gonna make it a lot easier at the machine. So now what I'm gonna do is just sew a little 1-inch rectangle. So it's 1 inch high. I'm gonna go over the lines I marked. I'm gonna go over the top stitching I already have on the sides, over the bottom one, up the top stitching, and then I'm just gonna do an X. So this is going to get the most use. So I want as much support as possible here. You could also go around this rectangle a couple times and then add a couple rivets, which would look so good. You know I'm a fan of doing that, but I'm just using stitching today. All right, so having those marks was so helpful. So now I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna pull up the strap. I'm gonna find my middle, there's my middle, and then the 4.5 inch mark to the right, I'm gonna line that up with the 2 inch mark that's away from my center, just like that. And it's on the outside, so it's on the right side of that 2 inch mark. Let's clip that in place. And you can see what I'm sewing. I'm always making sure the other side doesn't get sewn in on accident. This is so cute. So I'm always going slow here. I'm always checking to make sure the area I'm working on is flat, things are straight. I'm using the washi tape to really help make sure my strap is straight. There we go. And now I'm gonna remove the clips and mark my little 1 inch box. Remember, I'm lining up the top edge of my ruler with that 1/8 of an inch top stitching, not the very top of my bag, okay? You don't want to stitch right along the top edge of your bag. I'm just going to stitch over the 1/8 of an inch top stitching. And then I'm just going to re-add my clips. All right. And again, it's difficult at the machine because the bag is big, but you always want to just stop, readjust, and make sure this spot is exactly the way you want it. Don't rush through this, okay? So once again, I'm just going to go over my marks and over my X and just top stitch this in place. Oh man, this is looking so good. So let's just give it a little test. So you can see there's one version here where we hold it like that, and the other version we hold it up. And when it folds, ha ha ha, our tag is pretty straight. Ha 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 ha, success. All right, so I'm just gonna repeat that exact same process for the other side with the pocket. I am gonna show it to you, but I'm not gonna walk you through it. I'm just gonna kind of speed up the video so you can see how it works out, but yeah, I'm not gonna walk you through all of it again. That is not the midpoint. Wow, this bag is looking so good. All right, so if you want to be done, you can be. I'm going to do a couple more optional things in the pattern. The first one is we're going to pinch in these corners. This looks cool. You don't have to do it, but it looks really cool. I just want to look at this too. Oh, I love this bag. Okay, so the corners, it's not so much measurement as it is eyeballing. So see how we have our box bottom corner? What you want to do is just kind of straighten it out until it goes all the way up to the top. It doesn't have to be a specific measurement. You just want to straighten like a line going from this bottom box corner to the top and then fold there. So you see when I fold this, it gives me a nice, a straight line to me, but who knows if it's actually straight. I make some pretty wonky lines here. So I'm just going to clip it like that. I'll measure it in just a moment. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side though. I'm just going to take this, let me see if I can do it on the side for you. So here's my corner, and I'm just going to kind of pull it. There we go. And then just take a good look at it. Ooh, it's hard, it's so big. Take a good look at it from the side too. Try your best to get it all the way up. So that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to add a clip here as well. I'm going to do the other side. Once again, just going to the corner down here. I kind of pinch the corner with my finger and then pull the whole bag up. Let's see. You're going to want to just kind of pinch and look. Pinch and look. It's one of those things where it's like, do a little bit, stand back and look at it. How does it look? Does that look? Yeah, that looks pretty square, doesn't it? All right, let's do the other side. All right, and then we're going to just kind of box this. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so I have 4 bits clipped. So the first time I sewed this, I actually sewed it wrong. I sewed it along the top stitching. You're actually supposed to sew it right here on the edge. So let's try it. Let's see how it looks. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew right along this edge here. You might want to put another clip here just to make sure it stays the way you want it. So that's just going to give it a tiny pinch. I think, let's see, what do we want to do? I'm going to start at the top stitching. So the top stitching, that's 1/8 of an inch away from the top. I'm going to start there. And I'm going to sew down about 3/4 of an inch. I think I'm going to give it a 1/4 inch seam allowance right here. And I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Let's see how that looks. Okay, yeah, that looks great. You just want like a little thing here that just pinches it. So it gives the bag a totally different look. Instead of widening it out right at the seams, it gives it a much more square shape, which is so cool. You could also do rivets here if you want. You could just add one little rivet right in the corner at each one of these. Be done in just a few seconds. But I'm going to continue this. So for each one of these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch down from that top stitching row. I'm going to do that for all 3 remaining corners. All right, now I'm just making sure I add some clips to the sides as well so it all stays together nice and neat. I'm also sewing through the lining, not just the exterior or anything. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to go around each one of these, and I'm just going to start at the top row, top stitching, go down to my mark, which is 3/4 of an inch down, back stitching at the beginning and the end, and I'm sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Man, oh man, look at how adorable this bag is. Oh my word. I hope you love this as much as I do. I really do, because it is so cool. All right, so that's the end of the bag tutorial. I'm going to create a tassel now, which is completely optional, but there's no more sewing in this video. Okay, so you guys, tassels are one of those things. If you haven't made a tassel yet, get ready, because you're going to be making a lot of them. They're fun. So first thing, you're going to have your 2 cuts of material. This is the very, very skinny cut. You can make it thicker if you'd like. For this tutorial, it's actually good to be nice and skinny, but that does mean it needs to be durable enough to not rip when we use it. And then you have your bigger cut. You're going to measure 1/2 of an inch down from the short edge of your bigger cut of material on the wrong side. And then we're just going to cut slits that are from the bottom edge up to that marked edge that are about 1/4 of an inch apart. You could measure it all out, draw it, cut on those lines, or you can live on the wild side like I do and just eyeball it. One tip that I've seen before from people, before you start cutting, if you want to make this tassel a little extra, and I wish I would have done it because it'd be so cool, put some like glittery heat transfer vinyl on the back of this first. So just get your iron, get some glittery heat transfer vinyl, cut the heat transfer vinyl to the same size as this piece, fuse it onto the back so the back side is super glittery and the front side is your vinyl, yeah, and then your tassel is very extra. So I'm definitely going to be doing more tassels with that method. But I am trying to make sure we just use what is included in the subscription box so you can see exactly how it'll turn out. But always feel free to modify, add your own stuff. I mean, be creative. That's the whole reason we're doing this, right? So as you can see, some of my strips are a little thick, some of them are a little thin, some of them are both. They're thick in some spots and thin in other spots. All right, so once these are all trimmed, I have a little hair clip here. You could also use, a bigger clover clip, anything, something to hold this together, but I like these little hair clips. And what we're gonna do is glue this together. I'm using E6000 glue. I like E6000 glue, it works well. I'm also out of my Beacon 3-in-1. So first thing I'm gonna do is add a little bit of glue to the top left corner on the back. And then we're gonna take our long skinny strip, we're gonna lay it right side down in that glue. It can line up with the marked edge or it can go a little bit lower. It doesn't have to be that precise. There we go. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more glue on that little bit of the strip that's glued down there. I'm gonna fold my strip wrong sides together. There we go. All right, that part's good. Now I'm gonna take my glue and I'm gonna put it on top of the strap, and then I'm just gonna also put it all over this top edge here that's 1/2 inch with no frills or anything, no fringe. There we go. I'm just kind of blotting it around all over the place. If you have a specific type of glue you like to use for this, let me know. So now I'm gonna roll this around my strap, and I'm trying to get it as tight as possible without making a big gluey mess with all over my fingers. Which is probably just how it's just gonna happen. It's fine. So as I'm rolling it, I'm trying to make sure it stays flat up here. You know, sometimes when you roll things, you get like a cone effect. I don't want the cone effect. I want it to be flat. So I'm just gonna keep rolling it all the way up to the very end. And tuck and push. I know, right now you're like, that is way too flimsy. That's not gonna work, but it does. All right, so now once I have it all nice and tight and rolled up, I'm just gonna attach my little clip to it. There we go. And I'm gonna let that dry. And look how fun. This is a drapey tassel. Again, think about it. If you had glitter on the other side of this material, wouldn't that look great? So I'm just gonna let this dry. And E6000 glue is great because once it dries, it is very, very firm. But it is slippery when wet. All right, so I'm just gonna let that dry and stop messing with it. So once it's dry, I'll attach it to my bag and I'm all done. All right, so I know I already showed this bag off in depth in the beginning of the video. I hope you guys love it. I did try to make sure I picked material that would be good for beginners, for people who are a little bit more intermediate. So it is durable enough to work well as a beach bag, pool bag, everyday bag, you know, stuff it with snacks, something spills, you can wipe it out kind of bag. But I was also trying to make sure I can use materials that aren't gonna be a needle breaker. You gotta go slow on this bag. I'm gonna tell you guys, the beginner is who I'm thinking of when I'm picking out materials for all of the makes in this monthly project box. However, just because you're a beginner doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. That's something to remember. Just think about that. I believe in you guys. I believe in you beginners. You can make hard things. So just because it's beginner friendly does not mean that it's fast and easy. You might still have to take your time. This is one of those bags where there's a lot of simple things. There's no zippers. We don't have any really big seams that are gonna like go from being a thin seam to a thick seam and break your needle. However, it's a big bag. And with a big bag, you kind of have to wrestle it a little bit, so you gotta take your time. So using the material that we have here, it has a nice structure, but it's also nice and smushy enough that you can kind of smush it in your suitcase, take it out, it's gonna be great. But if you are ready for some thicker material, I want to show you the bag that I practiced on. So as always, I practice a pattern before I film it, and this is the bag I made practicing. Now this yellow vinyl is a little bit thicker, and the waterproof canvas is actually the OtterTex waterproof canvas, which is also thick. But, and then I also have some fun shiny vinyl on the bottom. So all of this material is quite a bit thicker than the material that's provided in the box. However, this is a more structured bag, and it turned out really cute as well. If you have like a printed fun vinyl and you're like, I really want to use this, but it's going to be way too difficult on like smaller pouches, crossbodies, because it's just too thick, this is a bag you can use it on. You're going to use a lot of it, but that structure is going to be perfect for the size of this bag. And even though it's big, it'll be a little bit easier to use the thick material than on a smaller bag. You know what I mean? But no matter how you do it, I just hope you love it. And again, if you decide to use some of this material and then use some of it somewhere else or use some of your own, let me know, share a picture. I'm so excited. If you love this bag, let me know. If you've already made this bag, let me know. The patterns we'll be using in the Mystery Monthly Project Box aren't necessarily new patterns. They might sometimes be brand new patterns, but a lot of them might be patterns that you've already made or that you've seen even maybe on the channel once before. But the box is gonna contain all the things you need, and I'm gonna be providing some other little tweaks. And you know we're gonna try to put in as many extra goodies in those boxes as I can get them to do. So I hope you love making this Poppins tote as much as I do. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye guys.